Sarà un certi canali o la 102 è l'idea della 105.
Scusate il cambio d'aula. Un momento. Ma aspettiamo qualche minuto.
Sì, perché sono di scambiarci sulle
Niente per dire. Non c'è niente di quello che Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this PhD colloquium. Apologize for the change of the room. This was due to a last-minute glitch overlap with room occupancy and things like that. Today, the speakers today is Professor Tony Acín. Paolo will shortly introduce him scientifically. He comes from Barcelona. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure. For PhD students, please sign the usual paper. Okay.
Okay, it's an honor for me to introduce Antonio. He works in ICFO, which is one of the main world centers for quantum information theory, and in Barcelona. And the main interests of Antonio are based on quantum information processing in particular, we focus on quantum communication protocols and cryptography. And on the foundational side, he is famous for the study of geometric properties of this quantum state space based on a hierarchy of non-locality constraints. And also the topic which he will talk about today is one of his main research activities, which is device-independent scenario. So device-independent analysis of protocols is generalization of the setup of the Bell theorem, where you just look at correlations between events in measurements and in your protocol, but you don't rely on the specific description of the devices at hand. So you don't even have to trust the fact that they are quantum mechanical devices or classical devices. And you can gain convincing information both on the fundamental side and also inspiration for information processing and communication protocols based on this. So Antonio is an important scientist worldwide in quantum information theory. He is the recipient of 4 ERC grants, which is, it's already hard to have one. And he has 4, and he has some important scientific awards. And I'm very happy that he's here today to explain us about the device-independent scenario. So quantum information processing based on this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you think I need a micro? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. So I think this is a talk where, I mean, feel free to ask me questions anytime. I think. I mean, I'm not sure if this will happen, but you are invited to do it, okay, during my talk or at the end of the talk. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here and have some Italian genes, so I'm always happy to come back to Italy. And I'm happy to be here also because, I mean, Pavia is one of these places in our field, quantum theory, in which the concentration of talent is really, the density of talent is amazing. I don't know how many people live in Pavia, but you have very good, I mean, people who made very similar contributions to our field who are sitting here. So I'm very happy to be here and see where they work. And yes, I mean, I will say with Paolo, I should come back with more time next time for discussion. So today is a bit short, but I'm sure I will enjoy it. And as Paolo said, I mean, he spoiled a bit my talk. I will tell you about this device-independent scenario, which is a scenario in which is one of the main themes of research in my group at ICFO. And we do several things, but we are very interested in this device in the quantum information scenario. So basically, the objective of my talk is that you understand why we care about this scenario, why it's relevant, and then that you understand also a bit of the methods and the tools that we use in this scenario. Okay, this is all what my talk is about. And I assume that some of you don't know much about quantum information theory, so I won't use many equations in my talk. So, but if there are any doubts, you should stop me. And then I think I don't have any highly technical concept in my talk, so I should be able to answer your questions, I believe, if you see any problem. Whenever I give a talk to say general public, okay, you know about quantum physics, I spent some time with this first slide. So our field is the field of quantum information theory or quantum information science, and you also put experimental activity. So basically what the field wants to know, wants to understand, is what happens, what you can do with information when you put information on quantum particles. And what is interesting is that you can do. What did I do? Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. You can do different things when you put information on quantum particles. And I think this is, we will see what happens with quantum information, whether we will have quantum computers or whatever. But I think the way we understand information has changed because of the field. So the moral is that physics matters when you care about information. And if you had asked me when I was a student whether having quantum or classical particles for information processing makes any difference, at that time, when I was young, I would have said no. Okay, because my understanding at that time is that information had nothing to do with physics. Okay, so I took a course on telecommunication engineering. I had a degree on telecommunication engineering and a degree in physics. At my time, I never had any course on information theory in physics, because we thought that this was, actually, we always thought that this was the beauty of information theory, that it's irrelevant the way you implement information processing. A bit is a bit, no matter how you implement a bit. Okay, so I can send you bits with these two objects. I can encode a 0 in the pointer. I can encode a 1 in the microphone. This is a bit. Of course, we don't communicate with microphones and pointers because it's not practical. But you should understand that from a logical point of view, this is the same. So I think this was something nice about information, but actually it's the opposite. Okay, so the things you can do with information depend on the physical laws of the devices you use for information processing and encoding. Okay, this might be very easy for some of you, I know. Trivial, but I think it's something that will remain in the field, our understanding of information. Okay, so this is a very nice, so this is why physicists, we can say things about information because physics matters. And then the field, okay, it's evolving, and now there are very important investments on information processing devices, and you can even now find commercial devices. So you can have devices in which a company tells you that this is a quantum computer. We might discuss whether it's a quantum computer, but this is the way sometimes they name these devices. In labs, people are preparing what is called quantum simulators. So these are devices in which, in a proper way, you simulate another system of interest. You can secure your messages with quantum information. So this is quantum cryptography. You can also buy quantum cryptography, or you can generate random numbers based on quantum physics, and these are quantum random number generators. So usually what happens is that, say you want to buy one of these devices, well, you have to pay a lot of money because they are not cheap. So then you go to the provider and you say, okay, I want a quantum cryptographic device. Okay, and the provider takes your money first, and then say, okay, here's your quantum cryptography device. And then you look at it and you pay a lot of money, you say, wait, is this quantum? And the provider will tell you, yes. Okay, this is all what you will get. So then, especially in these early days in which we are preparing these devices and say our control is limited and they are noisy and they are expensive and they are supposed to do something that is not possible with our classical devices. So we should better know whether this box is a quantum computer, whether this properly simulates another system of interest, whether this is cryptographically secure, and whether this produces any form of quantum random. Okay, and this is the problem of certification. So the problem is that we are not quantum physicists, we are poor users. We don't have access to quantum devices. If we get a quantum device, we are never going to open the box and see what is in the inside. Also, because if we did that, we would not be able to understand what's, even if I'm as a theorist, even if I open a device, I look at it, I don't understand anything. Okay, so I always put trust on the fact that the provider told me when I paid a lot of money that the device was quantum. So we should have design tools to certify that these devices behave as expected with our limited classical information capabilities. Okay, and this is the problem of quantum certification, which is relevant and very transversal to the field. So basically, it's a problem of relevance for any quantum information application. Okay, and possibly, if you have seen a talk by me in the past, probably you have seen this joke, but I hope that many of you have not seen a talk by me. So this joke is perfect to illustrate what I want to say. Okay, so this is the user, say you, me, and we want to buy a random number generator, even quantum. And this is the provider. Okay, and you want to buy the random number generator, and this is the device you are buying. Okay, and then you see, this might be even quantum or classical, who knows? Okay. Well, I don't know whether it looks quantum or classical, okay, but we don't know. Okay, and then you as a user, you wonder, okay, are you sure that it is random? Okay, and the provider says, well, he's thinking classically, and he's saying that we can never be sure about randomness. Okay, so you will see that in physics, you can certify the presence of quantum randomness in quantum physics. Okay, so you can, which is almost, it sounds like paradoxical, you can be sure that something is random in quantum physics. But more in general, this is what my talk is going to be about. Okay, so we want to certify the correct functioning of a complex, potentially complex quantum device only from the statistics it produces. Okay, so we want to certify that something is, say, random or achieve something that that we are interested in. And in my talk, I'm going to focus especially on cryptographic applications that you will see. And you will see why. Because I guess this is clear at the moment. Okay, so if you remember this joke, this is what we are trying to do now in what follows. And this is especially relevant for quantum cryptography. Okay, so what is quantum cryptography? These are schemes in which I can send information to a friend of mine, say Paolo, in a secure way, so that an enemy, the eavesdropper, that is usually called Eve, is not able to read this information. Okay, so what we do, we encode this secret into quantum particles, and we exchange quantum particles, and there are schemes that allow you to prove that you can exchange information in a secure way when using quantum particles. Also, quantum key distribution is a change in the way we understand security. Okay, so before quantum cryptography or quantum key distribution, which is the way of making these changes, before that, all the cryptography that existed and that we use today is based on something called computational security. So if I want to send a secret to Paolo, I use a protocol. The most famous is called RSA, it doesn't matter. And basically the protocol is secure because someone trying to hack the protocol needs to solve a very complex problem. And as we believe that this person does not have access and super duper computer, I'm not saying a supercomputer like the ones we have, an even more powerful computer, okay? This person cannot solve this complex problem, hence the enemy cannot hack the protocol. Okay, this is called computational security. The protocol is secure because this complex problem cannot be solved by the enemy. In quantum cryptography, you don't make any assumptions about the complexity of a problem. You simply say that your enemy, can do many things, but cannot break the laws of quantum physics. And then, since we exchange communication with particles that satisfy the laws of quantum physics, we use the laws of quantum physics to ensure the communication. And then this gives the concept of physical security. Okay, so I believe we assume, okay, when I talk to physicists, this is maybe not even an assumption, but we assume that I put information on photons. Photons are quantum particles, they are described by quantum laws, and I send these photons to Paolo, and we run a protocol, and the protocol is secure because an enemy who wants to read this information has to break the laws of quantum physics. Okay, this is the concept of physical security. And then using the laws of quantum physics, you can prove that the protocols that have been invented are secure. Okay, they cannot be hacked by the enemy. Okay, so this is the concept of physical security, very nice concept. So we can somehow feel safe if we buy quantum cryptography. Okay, that was very nice, but almost more than 10 years ago, and you can buy quantum cryptography. You can go to companies and you can buy it. Okay, quantum cryptography. More than 10 years ago, there were several teams of researchers, in particular Vadim Makarov, who is here, and co-workers. They went to one of these companies that were selling quantum cryptography, unbreakable with a security probe. They bought these devices and they hacked the devices. Okay, so they published a paper in Nature Communications, because it became a famous paper because it was something was happening. Okay, and you see, you have to be surprised because it seems that I'm lying to you, because I wrote that there is a security proof, okay, that Makarov hacked quantum cryptography. So we have to understand why this, how come this could happen. Okay, so we are logical people. There are several possibilities. Okay, maybe Makarov found a mistake in the security proof. Okay, does he look like a mathematician? You see, a lot of devices. Okay, he's not even a theoretical physicist. He's an experimentalist. So for sure, he did not find any mistake in the security proof. Now, the security proof, I said that is based on the laws of quantum physics. Maybe he proved the laws of quantum physics wrong. No, okay. So he would have won the Nobel Prize already. He would have known about Makarov breaking the laws of quantum physics. Okay. So there was something that he did that was different. Okay. And there was something that we didn't understand about quantum cryptography. And that was why the hacking attacks were very useful for us to better understand quantum cryptography. So how come Makarov could hack quantum cryptography despite the existence of security proofs based on the laws of quantum physics? Well, this is because what Makarov and the hackers do, they don't break the principle of quantum cryptography, they break the implementation. So this is very important. Okay, so what I mean by this is the following. If you take any protocol of quantum cryptography, for those who know, when that's BBAT4, if you know what I'm talking about, if not, it's not important for what I'm saying. But basically the protocol is defined, you say, okay, there are two honest users, Alice and Bob, who wants to exchange a secret. And Alice has to prepare states of a qubit of spin 1/2 particles, and she has to send these spin 1/2 particles to Bob, and Bob has to make measurements of spin, let's say, or polarization in some given directions. This is how the protocol is constructed. Okay, so the protocol tells you the theory. You have to prepare states in a given Hilbert space. I assume everyone knows what a Hilbert space is. Okay, good. Of dimension 2, because this is a quantum bit is something that lives in a Hilbert space of dimension 2, and you make, say, spin 1/2 of the This is the protocol. Okay, now you go and what do the providers do, or what do the experimentalists do? Do they prepare states living in a Hilbert space of dimension 2? Well, I argue that this is impossible. By this, I don't mean that people cannot prepare qubits. Of course, people prepare qubits, but they put qubits on atoms, on ions, on photons, and these are not objects that live in a Hilbert space of dimension 2. Okay, a photon has a frequency, it has orbital angular momentum, it has polarization. Actually, every system has infinite degrees of freedom. You believe that you are using only 2 of those to define your qubit, but you can never be sure. Okay, maybe accidentally you are using all the degrees of freedom. This might not be important if you want to use your qubit for computation, but for security, this might be relevant. So actually, the provider tells you, look, I'm going to prepare your states in a Hilbert space of dimension 2 using a laser. Does a laser live in a Hilbert space of dimension 2? For sure not. And then I don't know how to make ideal spin 1/2 measurements, 10 get luck. I'm going to use a single photon detector, it's a massive object. For sure, this is not an ideal spin 1/2 measurement. So then for the hackers, here you have a security proof under this condition, but this is irrelevant for the implementation because this is where reality lives. Okay, so they hack the implementation independently of whether there is a security proof or not. And this is why they can hack the protocol despite the existence of the security proof without breaking the laws of quantum physics. So in a way, for you, it's it's not so important to have a security proof here because the implementation is there. And this is because there is a mismatch between what happens in the implementation and what you have in the theory where you prove security. So this is telling you that it's very nice to have protocols based on physical security, but if the security of your protocols relies a lot on the physical models, on your physical details of your implementation, then this may be a problem. Because it might be very difficult for you in the implementation to meet all the physical requirements that are needed for security. Okay, so there is a gap here. And whenever there is a gap, you may prove security, but this security proof does not necessarily apply to the implementation in the theory. Okay, so physical details in this sense, especially if you are fighting against an enemy, become a weakness. Okay, so actually what the hackers did, they bought the devices and they opened the devices. I was told that when you buy the devices, you are told that you are not allowed to open them. So they opened them and they made reverse engineering and they understood some parts of the devices even better than the provider. And this is why they could hack them. Okay, so what's the solution to that? Well, a solution is something that we propose in this paper. So you have to really deal with the devices in the way users deal, as black boxes. Okay, because when you buy quantum cryptography or a random number generator, you go to the provider and you say, give me quantum cryptography, and then the provider gives you a box. So you have to do cryptography applications or quantum information applications for black boxes. Okay, it sounds like very minimalistic and almost impossible. So we have to give options for the user to interact with the devices. How do poor users interact with devices? We don't do it with quantum information. We do it with classical information. Okay, so this is why we allow the users, now Alice and Bob, to interact with the devices, given classical information to the devices, and then the devices give back classical information. So for you to understand what I'm saying, you can think of the devices having N buttons, and then you, with your finger, press one of these N buttons. And then this device, you may think that at the bottom there are lights, and whenever you press one button, one of the lights is on. Okay, so your choice of button is what you call X, and your light, the light that is on, is what you call A. You can take 1 to R. Okay, this is just a convention. Okay, you can think of you have the possibility of putting a knob in N different positions, and depending on your position, the device gives a music tone, and you call the music tone 1, 2, 3. You may even call it blue, yellow, and green, or Mauro, Paolo, Antonio, Daniele. These are just labels. Okay, they are irrelevant. But you should have the possibility of choosing how to feed the device and then getting a result. Okay, this is just classical information. And this is what I represent here. Do I need to trust the provider for that? No, because it's me pressing buttons and observing lights. Okay, so I see how the device behaves. I don't model anything. I know there is a process here producing the output given the input, but I don't make any assumption about how this is done by the device. So how do I describe the devices in the black box approach? By the statistics they generate, like the daemon, instead of saying 9999999, I just see the statistics that the devices produce. So Alice and Bob spend some time pressing buttons and seeing the lights, and then they look at the probability of seeing the result A here and B here when you use input X here and Y there. Okay, again, you don't model anything, you just see the statistics produced. Now, if from the generated statistics you can conclude that these devices allow you to run cryptography, then you have a situation in which there is no mismatch between the theory and the implementation. Because your theory demands that some given statistic is produced, and then in the implementation, you check whether this statistic is produced. That's it. If the statistic is not produced, you give the boxes back to the provider. But if the statistic is produced, the theory tells you that this is enough for cryptography, and you are the security is self-certified by the statistics produced by the device. Okay, you have to understand what I'm just saying because this is the main point of my talk. Good. Okay, so in general, once you understand this, we can run this. Then we define it as a new form of quantum information processing, which is a quantum information theory for black boxes, in which you give classical inputs and you get classical outputs, and everything is based on the statistics produced by these devices. What I will assume is that these devices are, say, causally well-defined. Okay, I have a well-defined process of input-output that does not depend on what happens on the other device. This is like assuming that the output events are causally disconnected, so there is no communication when these processes take place at each device. This is going to be an assumption during all my talk. Now, if from the statistics you can run a quantum information protocol, this protocol is self-certified, okay, because you know that it works well because it produces the right statistics. Okay, so this is why this language is so important in the context of quantum certification I was telling you before. And you can see it as a quantum information theory for black boxes that we also call device independent because we want to run protocols without independently of how you model the devices, like actually with no modeling of the device that are seen as black boxes. Okay, so why? How come we can do devices in this minimalistic scenario? Okay, just inputs, outputs, and boxes. Okay, so well, this is because in quantum physics we have something called Bell theorem. Okay, so the Nobel Prize this year was given. This is very good news for our field. Was given to Bell theorem. So, but this is a situation in which Bell theorem is very useful. Okay, because in all my story, I started from a practical motivation. I was telling you the problem of quantum information devices, and you as a user buying, spending a lot of money to buy a device. Okay, I was giving you a practical motivation. This is because this is Alice and Bob who want to run cryptography. They go to the provider and they get these boxes that they can interact with, and they have to run a protocol with these boxes. But now I'm going to do something very simple. I'm going to call this provider a source. So what is that? A situation in which a source prepares two systems and you make some measurements and you get some outputs on a particles to provide a source. This is a Bell test. Okay, the definition of Bell test is you prepare entangled particles, but I mean, Bell test does not make reference to any nature of the particles. It says a source prepares some particles and some measurements are implemented on these particles and you get some result. So the language I'm using is the language of Bell theorem. Okay, if you now replace the provider by a source, this is Bell theorem. Okay, so the providers taking boxes and interacting with the boxes is the same as observers interacting, making measurements with particles prepared by a source. So this is why device-dependent quantum information processing is a quantum information theory based on Bell theorem. Okay, and one of the lessons that we have from Bell theorem is that the statistics that you get in this experiment depend on the physical theory that describes these devices. Okay, I'm going to tell you now this. Okay, so this is also one of my take-home messages for you. Okay, what you can get here depends on the physical nature of these devices. Okay, and this, yes, remember also this. Okay, you see it's in red and boldface. Physical principles tell you a lot about this object that I'm going to call correlation, because it tells you how these devices behave in a correlated way. Okay, let's give a look at that. Okay, so what is this object that I'm dealing with in this device-independent scenario or in Bell theorem? It's a quantum information theory, but I'm never going to deal with any Hilbert space. So sometimes I also call it's a quantum information theory with no Hilbert spaces. You will see no Hilbert space in my talk. The mathematical object we deal with are the statistics you produce in the experiment. Okay, so what is that? It's something very simple. Okay, so you have these boxes, you keep pressing buttons, putting inputs, and observing the results. So for instance, Alice uses input 1 and Bob uses input 1, and then you see what are the probabilities of getting result 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, RR. Okay, what are these probabilities? What are these positive numbers? And we know that they have to sum up to 1. This is mathematics, it's not even physics. Okay. So the description of this experiment is given by this vector of positive numbers that is normalized. This is for the situation in which Alice uses 1 and Bob uses 1. But okay, there is a situation in which Alice uses 2 and Bob uses 1. Okay, you have again probabilities, positive, they sum up to 1. And so on, for all possible combination of inputs, you look at all the possible combination of results. So you have a table or a vector of many numbers or a table of numbers, all positive, and all these sums are equal to 1. Okay, this also has to be clear. It's nothing but simple mathematics, just probabilities. Okay, this is what I'm going to call correlation. Okay, it's just the statistics produced by these devices in separate locations. Okay, let's give an example to make it more tangible. I'm going to consider an example in which Alice makes 2 measurements, and I'm going to call this measurement 0 and 1. Not because I like to change the notation during my talks, but just for you to understand that I can call it 1 and 2, 0 and 1, -3 and 3, blue and yellow. And I'm going to call the results now +1 and -1. I could have called them 1 and 2 or 0 and -100. Okay, so let's imagine a situation in which whenever Alice measures 0 and Bob measures 0, if Alice gets +1, Bob gets +1, and this happens with probability 1/2. Okay, so they press button 0 and 0, and Alice and Bob see that whenever Alice gets plus, Bob gets plus. It looks like measuring a singlet, okay? You get correlated results. But I don't know what is inside the box. It looks like it was a singlet, okay? So this is telling me that this number is half. And let's suppose that the same happens for minus, okay? Whenever Alice sees a minus, Bob sees a minus. It really looks like a singlet, okay? Half. Of course, how much are these values? They have to be. So now let's imagine that the same happens when they use 0 and 1, and they use 1 and 0. I'm inventing this, okay? You can invent them. You can put positive numbers satisfying the normalization condition, okay? And now I will assume that whenever they use 1 and 1, they see anti-correlated results, okay? So they only see plus minus or minus plus. Why not? Okay? Do you see anything wrong with this? Just numbers, positive. So they don't violate anything, right? Okay. This looks like a very innocent table of probabilities that could exist in nature. Why not? But you can put here, I don't know, 2/3, 0, 1/3, and 0. And you can, I mean, there's a lot of room here for creativity, just put numbers. Okay, this is mathematics. Just even very simple mathematics. Okay, nothing deep. But we are physicists. And now let's go to what I was telling you before. Okay, so in principle in mathematics, you can assign any table of numbers here, but we are physicists. Okay, so if we have these two boxes and I'm in Barcelona, Paul is here in Pavia, what we will assume is that what I do in Barcelona does not depend on what Paulo does in Pavia. Okay? If you want to be really paranoid, we arrange things so that they are space-like separated. There is no time, not even for light to travel from one place to another. But I think in general, we can assume that what I do in Barcelona is not affected by what Paulo. I mean, Paulo is very smart, but not that smart, okay, to make things influence. Sorry, Paulo. So what I'm saying with this is that what I see, okay, my marginal distribution does not depend on what Paulo does, on his choice of input. Okay, this is called the no-signaling conditions. Okay, you see, it's just saying that my marginal distribution is well-defined, does not depend on y. And the same, what Bob sees does not depend on what Alice does. I think we are all happy with this condition. You can even justify this based on Einstein causality. But I think this is, common sense, okay? So what I do in Barcelona does not depend on what happens in Pavia. Okay, in general, for n devices, it says that what, say, the k party sees, okay, which I do by summing of the results of the other parties, does not depend on the inputs used by the other parties. Okay, you see, you have this, but this is very simple mathematics again, but you have some conditions that need to be satisfied when constructing these tables if you want them to be compatible with the no-signaling principle. What do I mean? Okay, let's look at this example. Okay, you have Alice makes and Bob measure two observables, two inputs, and they get two outputs. So what I'm demanding is that the probability that Alice sees +1 when she uses 0, that I can compute by summing over Bob results when he measures 0, which is the sum of these two, cannot depend on what Bob does. So it has to be the same when Bob measures 1. So this number, which is equal to this plus this, you see I'm summing over both results. Whenever Alice measures 0 and Bob measures 0, it's half. This has to be the same when Alice measures 0, but Bob measures 1. But it is. Okay, you see what I did? I was just comparing two sums, they have to be equal. Well, believe me, all the conditions are met by this table of probabilities. Okay, so it was not completely random when I was choosing these halves and zeros. Okay, so if you look at now, what's the probability that Bob measures plus when he measures 1? Okay, you will have to sum some other terms here and some other terms here, and you will see that all the conditions are satisfied. So this is an example of a no-signaling distribution. Okay, so if you start putting numbers here at random, these linear conditions equalities won't be satisfied. Okay, what are the correlations that we I forgot. How much time? When did I start?
Something in 4, which is
How much time do I have? 20 minutes? Okay. Okay, so before the advent of quantum physics, what was the way we used to think about correlation? Okay, if we go to a provider and we buy some boxes, what happens is that someone, say the provider, has written a program to the boxes about how to behave. Or you can think that the provider has put a small demon inside the boxes who is sitting in the box with some instructions about how to behave, no? So the demon sees that you press a given input, a given button, and provides one of the lights is on. Okay, so this is the program that's inside the box, might be maybe probabilistic, is lambda, and then the output is produced in a deterministic way, given the input and the program on Alice's box and Bob's box. This is to me the way I used to think about, to think about correlations. Okay, what happens is determined by your input and by what it was inside the box in a deterministic way. Well, these are nothing but the Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen classical model correlations that we know from quantum foundations. Okay, again, I just really don't understand why people get so obsessed with locality and realism and things like this. Okay, this is to me common sense applied to correlation. Okay, if you have something, maybe not everyone agrees with me, but to me this is like what I do locally depends deterministically on my input and what was inside the box. Okay, we know that this is not the end of the story. We are quantum physicists, I believe. So the correlations, if we believe in quantum physics, we open a textbook in quantum physics, we look at the postulates, and it tells us, the textbook tells us, okay, probabilities in quantum physics are given by the Born rule, so there should be a state, measurements for Alice, tensor products measurement for Bob, because they are two different devices, and you have to combine them according to the Born rule, and you can get the probabilities. Okay, so I would say that some probabilities are quantum whenever I can find a state and measurements in Hilbert spaces for Alice and Bob that you put together and you get these probabilities. I'm not saying that this has to be a Hilbert space dimension 2 or 3. Okay, I'm just saying that there exists a Hilbert space dimension 100, 137, I don't know, in which you can find a state and measurements. And if this exists, then this correlation, this statistics has a quantum explanation. Okay, so I have the set of classical, quantum, and oscillating correlation that are defined based on physical considerations. Okay, maybe they are the same. We don't know. Okay, I'm just inventing this. No, I'm not inventing. I'm justifying this based on physical considerations. So what we know is that these sets are different. Okay, so I'm very bad drawing, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to represent here. Okay, so this is like a representation of this set of correlations. So we know the set of classical correlations. Okay, it's convex and it has like a polygon, a polytope. There is a set of quantum correlations, which is the red one, which is larger. And then there's this set of non-significant correlations that is even larger. So I'm zooming in this part here. So you have the set of classical correlations, quantum and signaling. This is Bell's theorem. Okay, there are correlations that you get when measuring an entanglement state that do not have a classical explanation. They are outside the set. Okay, this is perhaps less known, but this is a result by Sidelson and Popescu and Rodley, who proved that there are some correlations that do not violate the signaling principle, but you cannot obtain them in quantum physics. Sometimes when I give these talks, people tell me like, where can I find these correlations? I don't know. Okay, because our correct description of physics is based on quantum physics, quantum theory. But in principle, we could think of these correlations as an intellectual exercise. So can I prove this? Well, we are going to do it. Okay, for that, I will give you a crash course on Bell inequality. What is a Bell inequality? Well, the source, preparing and making two measurements. And I'm going to do it with the simplest and most famous Bell inequality. It's called Clauser-Hall-Shimoni-Hall. Clauser, maybe I'm familiar to you. Okay, the winner of the Nobel Prize. And it's just a statistical condition on the statistics you can produce in these experiments. So the source or provider, and you make two measurements of two outputs, or you push an input and you get an output. And then you take this expression here. So this is the output produced by box 1 when you use input 1, and this is the output produced by box 2 when you use input 1. So this can be a plus or minus 1. Okay, it looks like a stupid condition, but why not? Let's compute this number. Okay, so if we are in classical physics, these are deterministic assignments. Okay, so the output is determined by the input and everything in the device. So these are plus and minus 1, and you can easily prove that this quantity is bounded by 2. Okay, let's do it with an example. Let's consider a situation in which here this box produces +1, and this box also produces +1, no matter what the input is. This means that A1, all the terms here are +1. Okay, let's compute this quantity. Okay, this is perhaps the hardest demonstration, mathematical demonstration of my talk. +1 times +1 is +1. Plus times +1 times +1 is +1 again. Plus +1 times +1 is +1 again. Minus +1 times +1 is +1, but there's one minus, it makes a -1. Okay, so this sum is equal to 2 in this case. We all agree with this, okay? So you can see that for all combination of plus and -1, this quantity is +2 or -2. For sure, this quantity is bounded by 2, and even if it varies with time, the expectation value will be never larger than 2. This is a Bell inequality. Yeah. To me, this is common sense. We could even make a Bell test here, okay? I could take you, I could send you to 2 different locations. I could ask you 1 and 2, force you to give me plus and minus. It's a stupid thing, but we could do it. And I'm sure you will never give me a value larger than 2. We could challenge, I mean, we don't have time to do it, but yeah. Okay, the surprising thing is that if you do it with quantum particles, you violate this condition. Okay, this means that if I send 2 people to these 2 separate locations, it's a pity that we cannot do this today with our technologies. Okay, but if we had a maximum entanglement square of 2 qubits, they could put 1 quantum particle in the pocket, go to the location, get the question, get the quantum particle out of the pocket, make a measurement depending on the input of the question, and produce the output depending on the measurement result. And then, surprisingly, we would see that the number they get is 2 square root of 2 larger than 2. Okay, so this is telling you if you have your instructions on a quantum support, then you can violate this condition. Okay. So if you are not surprised by this, even if you knew the result, my talk is a failure. Okay, this is amazing, honestly. I don't understand how quantum physics manages to do that, but they do it. Okay, this has been proven in the labs. Well, what is this telling you? This is just telling you what I was telling you before. Okay, so what is a Bell inequality? It's a boundary between classical and quantum. So CHSH is really, you can interpret it as a hyperplane, and it's telling you that all the classical set is below the hyperplane. And if you take a value larger than that, you are violating the condition. Okay, this is CHSH bounded by 2. Hyperplane, you can shift it until it becomes tangent to the quantum set. And actually, Fidelson proved that the largest violation of CHSH in quantum physics is 2 square root of 2. Okay, all quantum physics is below this one. Now let's compute CHSH for this innocent point I was giving you. Okay, here A1 and B1. They can be either plus plus or minus minus. So the product is always plus. So this term is equal to plus. This term is equal to plus. This term is equal to plus. Now the last term, they are plus minus or minus plus. So it's a minus the product. So this last term is equal to minus. With the minus, it is 4. Okay, this innocent table of probabilities is impossible in quantum physics. Okay. So if you were an experimentalist, and you were obtaining this table of probabilities, making 2 measurements of 2 outputs on 2 separate particles, and you obtained this table of probabilities, you would be falsifying quantum physics in the same way as Bell theorem falsified classical physics. Then this is pretty remarkable. Okay, we don't know where to do that. All our descriptions are based on physical quantum physics theory. Okay, but this is what I was telling you, that only on the physical theory you have in mind, you have different statistics. Okay, and this is what we use to do device-dependent quantum influential processing. I say many things. Okay, I hope you understand that I started telling you things about money, devices, and providers, and now I'm describing very fundamental things, even crazy things like points beyond quantum physics. Okay, this is why I like this scenario. You can care about practical problems, but also you can think about very speculative questions of the foundation of quantum physics with the same language. Okay, so now let's go back to the joke, okay, by Dilbert. You want to buy a random number generator, and you don't want to know that the numbers are random because the provider told you that they were random. Okay, you want to prove it by yourself. Okay, what do you have to do? You, as a user, you have to go to the provider and you ask 2 boxes that allow you to run a Bell test. You don't buy a single box, you buy 2 boxes in which you can run a bell test. And now you see well divided a bell test. Remember, this bell violation certifies that these numbers are random. Because if they were not random, they will be predetermined to plus and minus 1, and then the bell violation cannot be violated. So if the bell inequality is violated, the numbers cannot be deterministic, they are random. So the randomness is certified by the observed bell violation. You don't need to trust your provider. Okay, so, and actually you can even bound the amount of randomness or lack of predictability by the bell violation. Okay, we did that in this paper. So this is the classical bound, everything is deterministic, but as soon as you enter the region of bell violation, the predictability increases. And at the maximal quantum violation, which is 2 square root of 2, your predictability is 1/2, which is perfect randomness. Okay, you something that can tell you 2 outputs you can predict with probability 1/2, it means that you cannot predict it. Okay, so this the user, you ask 2 boxes that violate a bell inequality, you see black boxes, and you certify randomness in this way. And you can, contrary to what the guy in the joke was saying, you can be certain about the devices producing quantum randomness. Okay, I have to say something. I mean, when I say that things are device independent, it doesn't mean that the things are device independent for everyone in the picture. Things are device independent for the user. The user wants to buy boxes, buys boxes, and wants to say interesting things about the boxes without opening them. The poor provider experimentalists, because things are not device independent, okay? If the provider wants to sell the devices, the devices have to be so that they violate the bell inequality, okay? So the provider has to make sure that prepares the right state and the right measurements, okay? The poor experimentalists, things are super device dependent, okay? So she has to really care about preparing the right state and right measurement. Okay, things are device dependent from the point of view of the user, as poor guys with no knowledge of mathematics. And okay, I don't have time, but we use the same idea for quantity distribution, and you can also make cryptography based on Bell's theorem. And things are device dependent. You can model your devices as black boxes. Okay, so and this is what I was telling you. Okay, so the same language of this quantum information theory for black boxes can be used in other contexts. Okay, so for instance, one of my interests now is how to make these protocols in practice. I'm a theorist, but I would like these protocols to become a reality. And this is, I mean, now you can say like, okay, can I go and buy device independent cryptography? No, you cannot, because it's challenging experimentally. It's not fundamentally impossible, but it's challenging. Okay, so we are thinking in my group about how to make these protocols more practical. It will be challenging, but we are thinking about how to do it. For those who know, it's simpler than a quantum repeater, and people are trying to do a quantum repeater. But this is a topic of research. And I'm always optimistic when giving talks, but then I talk a lot, and I never manage to explain all what I wanted. So I'm going to jump on the part of implementation. I can tell you if you are interested. Okay, you see, I have many things to say, but I'm not going to do it. And perhaps I'm going to mention that last year there were first proof of principle demonstration of device-dependent quantity distribution here. Okay, I'm going to jump on the last part, which is a result of quantum foundations, in which we use more or less the same techniques, because I think it's good for this, for a general audience. Okay, so you can understand device-dependent quantum information processing as an application of quantum information processing, because quantum information theory based on Bell's theorem. Now I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to use the techniques of device dependent to solve a question in quantum foundation. So what is the question? And this is what we did in this paper. So what is the question we're interested in? So you think now I become quantum foundations. Okay. So if you think about quantum physics or quantum theory in the standard Hilbert space formulation, so if you open the textbook in quantum theory, usually it's presented in terms of Hilbert spaces and states in Hilbert spaces. Okay. You open, there are the postulates. So I don't know if it's a surprise for you, but for me it was when I was a student. Everything is formulated in terms of complex Hilbert spaces. So you have a system to a physical system, you have a complex Hilbert space. A physical state is a vector. A measurement is given by a basis. Born rule you compute with the overlaps, and then you put systems together with a tensor product. These are the postulates. You swallow them. Okay, you don't even discuss them. They are given. Well, the complex I mean, it's the first theory in which the objects of your theory are defined with complex numbers. I mean, if you take electromagnetism, there are real electric and magnetic field. If you take Newtonian laws, there are real forces and real accelerations. Okay, they are real numbers. Quantum theory, in the Hilbert space formulation, things are complex. So this was also something that worried even the founders of the theory. Okay, so this was very good for our paper. We found this quote by Schrödinger in a letter to Lorentz, in which he wondered that maybe psi was real. Yeah. Somewhat, it's like in quantum, in electromagnetism, we use complex numbers, but we don't use them because they are fundamental to the theory. We use them because calculations become easier with complex numbers. Okay, maybe it was the same for quantum physics. Okay, so this is what we wonder. What happens if you replace complex by real numbers in standard quantum theory? So what I'm saying is something very basic, simple, okay? I accept the postulates, but I simply change Hilbert spaces complex from real. Okay, so we are not the first people. I mean, there's this paper and some other papers in which people did that. Okay, so you can see it again as a game. And the logic is the same as Bell's theorem. Bell's theorem you can understand as a game between two players. Someone who believes in Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen models, and someone who believes in quantum theory. Another quantum physicist has to design an experiment that the guy believing in classical models cannot reproduce with any model. So now we are going to do the same. Okay, there is a standard orthodox physicist like Paolo, who is a complex physicist, understood as a physicist who believes in complex quantum theory. And there is an heterodox quantum physicist, me, who is a real quantum physicist. Okay, so, and now Paolo has to come with an experiment that I cannot reproduce with my theory. He has to prove me wrong. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Of course, here, if I find an explanation within my theory for his experiment, he won't be able to falsify. Okay, so I can play with dirty tricks. He can give me an experiment with qubits. I can try to reproduce with real spaces of dimension 100. So this is not a problem. I can play with my theory as much as I want. If I have a model with my theory that reproduces this experiment will never falsify my theory. Okay, so Paolo starts with the game. Okay, he has to find an experiment I cannot reproduce. So he starts thinking, no, and then he thinks like, okay, I'm going to think a situation in which I make measurements on particles. I'm going to say it as a single particle and a single measurement. So I get producing statistics, and these are the traces of state and measurement. There might be more states prepared and more measurements applied, but for simplicity, I take just one. And these are complex operators. And then he comes to me, Antonio Acín, give me an explanation of these statistics with real quantum theory. Okay, then this is not a problem. I can do it. How do I do it? Well, you generated this with complex matrices acting on a Hilbert space, complex space of dimension D. I duplicated a dimension, which you can understand as adding an extra qubit. And I'm going to use these two states for the extra qubit, plus and minus I, which are the eigenstates of sigma y. They are complex, okay? But you will see that I'm going to use them in a smart way so that I produce real stuff. So I take the state and measurement that he used for the experiment, and I construct this operator and this measurement. So I take the state, I put tensor product with I, plus the complex conjugate, tensor product with minus I. It looks like something complex, but it's not complex. This is real, because if you take the complex conjugate of this object, you have complex conjugate here, this becomes minus, and then it becomes rho, and this becomes plus. So this state is equal to the complex conjugate. I hope you follow what I'm saying. It's also very simple. So this is a real operator, and this is a real operator too. And if you compute the probabilities this real state and real measurement give rise to, this is the same as in this experiment. So no way Paolo can prove me wrong in any of those experiments, because I can always find an explanation for the statistic with real quantum theory. I win. But then Paolo says, okay, this maybe was too easy, no? And we know that in situation it's better to prepare a highly complex entangled state with many particles and make many measurements, like it happened for Bell's theorem. I don't have time, but for any of those experiments, I can also find an explanation with real quantum theory. So I have to play this trick with these eyes and things like this. I don't have time to tell you. I mean, but believe me when I say that you can also do it. So this was proven by several people. There was this paper in BRL by McKay, Mosca, and Gizan. So some of people, I believe that people believed that it was impossible to refute real quantum theory in an experiment. Again, this is like, we want to find a situation in which the statistics cannot explain by a model, a physical model, okay? Because physical principles give you limits on statistics. Well, that was the state of the art until last year, or well, actually it was 1.5 years ago, in which together, okay, Marco Olivier was at that time postdoc in my group, and together with the group of Miguel Navasquez in Vienna, and also there was Nicolas and Anita Bacoli. So we designed an experiment consisting of 2 different states and 3 different measurements, in which we could prove that there is no explanation of real quantum theory for the statistics generated in this experiment. So for the first time, we identified a situation in which real quantum theory could be falsified. I don't have time to tell you, okay, but it's always the same logic, okay? You find limits on the correlations given by the physical principle of your theory. In one case, my theory is complex quantum theory, in the other case is real quantum theory, and we identify a situation in which they lead to different correlations. Now you only need to go to the lab, make the experiment, and you find these correlations in complex quantum theory, you can falsify real quantum theory. So we posted this paper, it appeared in Nature, but we posted, I believe it was January or December 2020, let's say January 2021. And we knew that it was a feasible experiment 3 months after there was experiment. Okay, so it was almost violating causality. It was a group of PAN who did it, and we also collaborated with another group in China to make the experiment they appear in PRL. So based on our theoretical findings, people refuted real quantum theory. So in a way, you can argue that standard Hilbert space quantum theory really needs complex numbers, or at least cannot explain all experiments in nature using real numbers. Okay, so with this I conclude. So I told you many things, but basically my main scope was to introduce you this way of thinking about quantum information protocols, or even about theories in nature based on correlation, okay, and devices with no modeling producing statistics. Okay, in the case, our motivation from a quantum information perspective came from the fact that these protocols give you self-certified performance. Okay, so you have the boxes, and you know that these boxes produce randomness of quantum origin because they violate a Bell inequality. No, you don't have to put any trust on your provider. You see it with your bare eyes. And this is also nice for me because Bell non-locality is really the effect you use for that. Okay, so when I remember when I was a student, I was a bit surprised that Bell theorem plays a sort of marginal role in standard quantum information theory, while it's fundamental for device-dependent quantum information theory. So I briefly told you about the protocols, about random generation, key distribution. There is also something called self-testing. So basically what we want to understand is what you can do in this protocol. I mean, it's nice, but you're also limited because if your boxes are black boxes, sometimes you cannot do as many things as you wanted with black boxes. And I didn't tell you, or I very briefly told you, this is challenging to implement in practice. Okay, so experimentally, there are many challenges here for you to think about how to do this. So basically, because if you want to run cryptography, in Paolo and I want to run cryptography in Barcelona and Pavia, we have to run a Bell experiment at distance. This is not easy. And also, I like this framework because you can also think about using this concept in other frameworks. So we have some ideas in many physics, quantum optics, especially for the implementation. And I illustrated this with my example about real and complex quantum theory. So this is an example in which we apply this concept in quantum foundation. And again, I think this is a very fundamental question now at this moment. So the quantum simplification, if you have a complex device, you want to say that it satisfies some interesting quantum properties. I mean, this is interesting from a say commercial point of view, but even from a fundamental scientific point of view. I mean, in the labs now people prepare very complex quantum systems with many particles, and we cannot reconstruct these systems because they need a lot of parameters. Okay, so we have to say interesting things about these systems with our limited classical processing capabilities. Okay, so we have to really understand how to deal with these complex quantum systems, now complex in the sense of difficult, when using our poor limited classical information. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Time for questions.
So I have a question on the last part of the code, which was quite funny, about the difference between real and complex single spaces. You say that experimentally proved it in a sense, so there's no more uncertainty now, but at the theoretical level, you can still try you take complex single space in area to our generation and detection of the signal, and you try to read the a counterpart, a real counterpart. But you say that you prove that there were cases in which you can't use it. And I was wondering, how could you be sure in the sense that there were no room for a right real space, real state? Because you know you can try maybe, and at some point you have to prove that there's no need to use a real. So is it difficult? I mean,
well, I went too fast in this part. Okay, so okay, what I did, I started by the simplest configuration you can think of, in which you see you make measurements on a particle. This particle can be, I'm not saying that it's a cubic, it can be any dimension. Okay. Now here the construction is as follows. Okay, so if you give me a realization with complex operators, I can always find a realization with real operators. Okay, no way you can then falsify this real quantum theory in this experiment. Okay. So what we do then is like we try to put a bit more. What do you do in a Bell test? In a Bell test, actually, why Bell when invented his test, he thought about two systems. Because he knew that the statistics produced by a single system, quantum system, you can always explain it with a single classical system. But if you go to two systems and you impose that these two processes don't communicate, then a gap appears. So you can try to do the same in quantum physics. So you can try to then not look at a single device, but at two different devices. How do we combine devices in quantum physics? We put a tensor product. Okay. So I know that if I stay in this very minimalistic scenario, I cannot falsify. So I try to put tensor products. So I do it a la Bell theorem. So in Bell theorem, you prepare an entangled state of many particles by a source, a single source. This is sent to different parties, and the parties make the separate measurement. So you put a tensor product there. Okay. Then you can have a mathematical construction that tells you that no way you can falsify complex quantum theory. Okay, because I can even you give me any realization, I can give you the operator realization with real quantum theory. Okay. So what we did, we understood that to falsify the construction, you needed to put also tensor product in the preparation. So this means that not only you apply different measurements, but you also prepare, you have independent preparation of states. So you see here, I have also tensor product for the states. Okay, then we had a candidate of a state here, a state there, and measurements with complex numbers. But now you have to prove that there is no real quantum expansion for that. I'm not saying this is easy. Okay, it's not. But with device-independent techniques, we know how to put bounds on correlations based on the physical theory you give me. And we can see within the physical theories, we can see the devices as black boxes. So we cover all possibilities. So somehow we can explore all possible real Hilbert spaces, no matter what dimension, because we have the techniques now to do that. Okay? I'm not sure if you understand all what I'm going to say, maybe not. But what I'm saying is that we now have the techniques to tell you, okay, what are the limits that I can get with devices that behave according to real Hilbert spaces. In the same way, I have the techniques to say, what are the limits that I can do with devices that behave according to complex Hilbert spaces? You know, this boundary that I was putting quantum. So I can put the same boundary, but now where I impose that things are real. This boundary is the same here and here, but we prove, I'm not saying this is easy, but look, this is why we made it here, okay, because it's not easy. We proved that for the realization we constructed, there is no way you invent real matrices here and there and there and there in any possible Hilbert space you can think of, that when you combine with the ball rule, give these numbers. So I don't have time to tell you, but you have to believe in progress. Yes.
I have a question. Well, I don't even know why this question occurred in my head, but okay, so the question is, like, does this depend on the dimensionality of the space in the sense that if I take an infinite dimensional continuous Hilbert space, then I'll be able to explain with real numbers?
No, yeah, that's a very good question, but it's not. So in all what I'm saying in this classification, I never use any dimension. So if you tell me, okay, here's an experiment with a qubit, do this, which is what is a qubit, is a Hilbert space, complex Hilbert space dimension 2. Try to do the same with a real Hilbert space dimension 2. I know I'm going to fail because what is a complex, what is the vector of complexity of Hilbert space dimension 2? I need, say, 2 complex numbers, well, up to normalization, and these are 4 real numbers. And in the real space, I have 2. So for sure, I don't have numbers to satisfy all what is going to happen in the complex Hilbert space with my poor real Hilbert space if I play with the same dimension. So by definition, but this is not a problem. So people, one of the possibilities was that we only use complex numbers just to save the effort. Okay, and that's why we needed complex numbers, because if we want to use real numbers, we need to go to larger dimension. That was one of the logical possibilities. Okay, and in fact, all the constructions I'm giving you double the dimension. Okay, but what we prove in our result is that I give you a realization actually with qubits, complex qubits, and no matter which real dimension, even infinite, you are not able to replicate these numbers. So we falsify all real Hilbert space.
But you're still using tensor product. So you
Yes.
keep the
Yes.
rule.
This is crucial, okay? Because if I don't use the tensor product, I mean, if you watch tensor products, they're here. Yes. But I think tensor product, I mean, to me,
Yeah, sure.
yes. I didn't cheat, okay? So I say, you keep this postulate. Okay. Although if you remove this postulate, yes.
Just going back to the single system.
Yes.
Just it might be very basic, but potentially going to ask, repeat this complex, but you can only use 1 qubit. And then you cannot use one real.
No.
If you impose only one, for example.
So if you play with dimensions, you can try to find gaps, yes. But I find it less important, I would say. But yes, I think it, I mean, for instance, something. So here, what this construction tells you is like, you give me a realization with a given dimension D, complex. I can always do it with a real system of dimension 2D. Okay, then here we know that D with 2D, I can always do it. And possibly this is type. Just simply discounting of parameter I was telling you, no? For to define a complex number, you need 2 real numbers. I believe that here it's type. I'm not sure if I have a proof, and maybe it follows trivially. I don't know, but probably it's type. Okay. Now, in this situation in which you start putting in some tensor products, okay, you see here I have a dimension d squared, d for one particle, d for the other particle. The tensor product is d squared. Hope you follow what I'm saying. Okay. In this construction, I have to put a qubit for each particle in my entangled state. Okay, so this means that this system now will be 2d squared, 4d squared. Okay, and if this state is an n particle state, it will be 2 to the n. Okay, maybe here I'm a bit brutal, but I can do it. Okay, so I think something potentially interesting is trying in those situations where you know that realization is possible, maybe try to see a large separation in terms of dimensions needed. But I find it less important than the no-go result.
So the experiment has been transformed by actually adding a qubit.
No, the experiment at the very end is very simple, okay? So this actually the correlation we had, the experiment that we found is a very simple entanglement swapping experiment. If you know, so you prepare a maximum entanglement state of 2 qubits here, you prepare a maximum entanglement state of 2 qubits here, you make a bell measurement here, and you make some X, Y, Z measurements here and there. Okay. So this is the complex experiment. Now for the real, you don't have to care. We already proved that there is no real way of doing it. Okay. So as for Bell theorem, in Bell theorem, the quantum realization you give, okay, prepare this state and make these measurements. Bell proved that these correlations cannot be met by a locative Warren model. Then the experimentalist only had to prepare that state and make these measurements and get this correlation. So here's the same logic. We already proved that if you get these numbers, you are not going to be able to reproduce them. So they only had to prepare maximum time state here, maximum time state here, make a Bell measurement and make these settings. And that was it.
You can use the same machinery, for instance, to test things like I don't know, physics is continuous or is very.
Okay, I never thought of. I mean, okay, I don't know. This is very deep. Okay, but I think you can think of crazy theories and try to test them and see. I mean, I think even like if one day quantum physics is disproven, it could have. At the very end, when you want to disprove a theory, so imagine you make an experiment in which you measure polarization of photons. You think of this, okay? And now you see that with your matrices of size 2 times 2, you cannot explain the experiment. Okay, doesn't mean that quantum physics is wrong. No, maybe you thought that you were measuring polarization, but actually you are measuring frequency. Okay, usually experimentalists have a better control to understand whether they are measuring polarization and frequency. Okay? But you can always argue, no, you thought that you were measuring a 2-dimensional system, but actually you're measuring a 3-dimensional system, and it can be that with matrices of size 3, you can reproduce the experiment. So I think, strictly speaking, if you want to falsify quantum theory, you have to really do it a la Bell. Okay, you have to exclude all possible explanations within quantum theory. And I believe this is the only way that you can do that. Okay, finding points outside the quantum boundary. I'm not sure it will go this way. Okay, I guess people will find a situation that they cannot explain with their understanding of the experiment with quantum theory. But ideally, you would like to exclude all possible explanations of quantum theory.
Thanks for the talk. Actually, most of the questions are on the second part, but of course, in the first part of the. My question is again on the second part. Maybe this is nonsense, but I was wondering if thinking about quantum mechanics in terms of wave mechanics and the wave function, there has been debates in foundations regarding the reality of the wave functions. Is your proof somehow related to the fact that the wave function can be a real object?
Yes, okay, maybe first I want to say something. There are variants of quantum theory that use real numbers. So if you think of Bose theory, it's a different theory that uses real objects, and it has the same predictive power as quantum theory. Okay, so here maybe I was not super precise in my. I'm just taking standard Hilbert space quantum theory. Okay, but there are other variants in which you can explain, or you can use kind of quasi probabilities, or okay, there's other ways of reproducing the prediction of quantum theory using only real objects. Now, usually what people take, I'm not a big expert on these things. What usually discuss people about the reality of the quantum state is like they try to see it as if it could be an object that describes our state of knowledge or something with more real entity, whatever this means. Okay. To me, it's a bit hard to think of a real object that is complex. Yes.
So in terms of.
But I'm not an expert on this thing. Right? So, yes.
But the wave function is a complex object that is a solution of a wave equation. So is this related to the fact that the wave function can be a real object?
Well, real in the sense is fine over the field of real numbers. This is proven. Whether this is an implication of whether this is, I don't know, real. I don't know what even real means. Well, I have a bit of maybe something.
Wave functions are just Hilbert space representation using a specific.
Yeah, but then when people tell you the reality of the wave function, I don't understand what they refer to. Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm not the right person.
Experiments trying to prove the measure of the wave function is the object. But I also don't really follow the.
If you keep tensor products, as Lorenzo was saying,
I don't know. I don't know. No, it's
So why do we need complex numbers?
yes, okay, this, I think we discussed this, whether you could go even,
Oh, yes,
you see,
even think of quaternions. and
Yeah.
stuff, So
I think something that would be nice was to prove that, okay, now you go to quaternions, but maybe you can prove that as it was happening for real numbers, whatever you do with quaternions, you can do with complex numbers. This would be nice.
yes, but
Or
that's
maybe it was even nicer. Maybe you could find predictions that are not possible in complex, and then it would be another.
It's a question I pose you like middle school. So how can you remember this?
Right, because it's a very good question. So,
The question I was asking you now is slightly different. So why do we need complex numbers? I mean, it's like philosophy.
yeah. Well, I mean, you may argue that I'm assuming a lot when I put the 5 postulates. No?
Alright, okay. So it's already different.
Yes. But it still is crazy that we need a theory in which complex numbers play so fundamental role. But there are other variants that I was saying about theory.
A little bit to that point, just another question. But so you said that okay, so in electromagnetism, we use complex number as a tool, but that complex number comes as a tool because we wanted to handle phases. Stuff. But in quantum mechanics, what exactly is the complex number doing? What exactly do we need it for? Like,
Well, we need that to make predictions about nature, no?
yeah,
To make the right prediction about nature.
We need it because photons have circular polarization.
Yes, yes, but still photos I can reproduce with adding more extra degrees of freedom. Photos won't be, it would be something a bit crazy to think about, but
Just one comment concerning the questions. It's been proven mathematical equivalence of quantum mechanics with quaternions and complex numbers. Results of 3-4 years ago. So it's known that the predictions are equivalent. It doesn't mean that you use complex numbers because at the end of the day it doesn't make any sense. Using a division ring which is more complicated and so that octonions and any other so-called division ring is completely pointless. So it's either complex or real sets. Okay. But one question I have is, have you thought of recasting your results going from quantum mechanics to the level of relativistic quantum theories? Because in that case, you still have potential products, of course, but in relativistic quantum theory, it's the right-hand side which worries me because there are no fixed classes, operators, so states cannot be represented as density matrices. So my question is, since of course we expect quantum mechanics to be, let's say, a limit of relativistic quantum theory, can you recast your results without using the right-hand side?
But how would you write probabilities in relativistic quantum?
You have states, but you don't. So you have hot spaces, but you only have expectation values as but no trace class. That's unfortunately known result which is.
Okay, I don't know. I cannot answer you. I believe that because we don't actually in our proof. You can even replace these tensor products by standard products and ask for commutation. And our proof still holds, okay? Okay, I don't know. I believe it will remain valid, but I don't know. Like, this is just a pure intuition.
But maybe probably if there's a gap between the correlation in the state then trace the limits of function, quantum function. If anyway outside of the completion of the real correlation. But this would be a way of saying that not even as basic.
Well, I mean, the gap here is microscopic, let's say, yes. So we have a Bell inequality for real quantum theory with a bound, and we can violate this bound. This is the way we prove the result.
Probably this problem is not related with zero sum problem, but it can actually simply any relation with commuting operators and factorized operators. Using the same kind of dimension, if the dimension, I think it's still open whether it's two.
No, they are different, but the commuting and tensor paradigms give you different correlations.
So in this case, it is.
We are working
here with commuting.
We are working in the commuting paradigm.
We're looking with the commuting part,
Yes.
the tensor products.
Yes.
Okay, so I think it's kind of settled the question.
Yes, so I wrote this because usually it's simpler to write.
Commuting is exactly the same scenario as in quantum field theory.
So yeah, we work in the commuting.
Okay, then it's a big difference. It's much better.
I have a super simple one. It's choosing Bentes promoted, but where all that's triggered by the hackers. I mean, the hackers, those who broke the protocol. I mean, the speculation between the quantum theory, the quantum laws and implementation. Or where you aware before that it could be different.
Okay, I'm not the only one working on these things. There are many different people. Okay, so I think it's an effort in many different directions. In my case, I think the fact that when we actually, I mean, if you look at what happened here, somehow, let's say for us, an important paper in my group was. Okay, maybe it would be much. So the paper where we proposed the device-independent quantum cryptography, and we found this paper in 2007, and the quantum hacking attacks became were in 2010. So actually, we proposed the solution before the problem. No, but we knew.
That was my question.
No, yes, but we understood that having many assumptions behind your security was a potential problem, and then we proved to be correct just by the hacking attacks. I believe they were not aware of how I did. Okay, so, but to me, it's a strong motivation, the fact that I can think about crazy things like real complex quantum theory, while at the same time with the same tools, I can even talk to experimentalists or even people trying to make devices. Okay, so I think this is to me a strong motivation. What came first? I don't, in my mind, I don't remember. For the community, I guess everyone has people working on that, but I think for me it's a strong motivation. The fact that I can start with this practical motivation part.
So if there are no more questions, I think we can thank you. Appena ciao Sara.